some in the Western mainstream media. I want to open with this before we get to the details of what was actually done during the summit, because I think this clip right here is very instructive of how things went.
It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say.
So Putin came in and steamrolled Pepe. What exactly in your mind happened? Because there was no actual agreed upon deal that came out of this, but at the same time, now we're having talks about some of Putin and Russia's positions now actually being forwarded in future talks with Zelensky, with the EU, etc. So talk about this, because that's a huge shift for the Russian side, not so much in their position, but in the dominance of their position.
He didn't steamroll anything. He didn't have to. He was greeted with, I would say, outstanding politeness by Trump. But this was very, very good from the beginning. The tone was set already at the airport, including the aerial show, of course, with B-2, the whole thing. But from the beginning, we could tell that there was a chemistry going on. And they both told each other, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to help you. Putin said in English at the airport already, I'm here to help you. And Trump also said, I will help you. Very, very important from the start. So this contradicted all the doomsday apocalyptic predictions before. And contradicted many of us. We didn't have high expectations for the summit at all. And after a while, and after the first hour, and after the second hour, and then we got to 150 minutes, we could tell already that they were really talking. And that means details about the reset of the strategic relationship between the superpowers, way beyond Ukraine, of course. So, contrary to all expectations, it was a success, all the way to the non-presser, of course. No? We were all expecting at least, 20 minutes, half an hour at least of back and forth questions. But, of course, this is not confirmed by either side. There was certainly an agreement after that first, was 30 seconds or 45 seconds when they entered the room. We had the 3+3 in the room, and that horde of savage hyenas from basically U.S. mainstream media hurling all sorts of on both. Probably at Team Trump 2.0 and Team Putin decided, okay, we're going to have two presentations at the end, and that's it. It makes total sense. They even the Trump team, they would not be, because in the tape that you played, she doesn't say the American part of the room was extremely hostile to Putin, to Trump, to Putin, obviously, and to Trump as well. They were extremely hostile to the big players. So obviously it makes total sense. So why are you going to deign to answer those stupid questions? I already know them from the beginning. So what we had was Putin he was making a presentation following his notes. So this means, he went exactly to the key points that needed to be stressed. And from Trump's side, obviously, it was an ad-lib improv.
It was.
As usual, we were used to it, all right? We know.
I don't want to play the presser, Pepe, really quick, but I want to just show, just here you see, as you're saying, we won't play any of it, but look, if you see, Putin spoke all the way up into the 8th minute of 12 minutes. I believe he finished close to 8:30, and Trump spoke for 4, and this drove the the United States establishment wild,
Wow.
because he dominated. And the way that Putin did it, Pepe, was it reminded me of how he approached the Tucker Carlson interview in a very, very kind of small situation, much more microcosmic situation. But continue.
So, okay, to set the tone about the most important decisions, I'm going to give you, Danny, in our audience, two quotes. The first quote is by President Putin himself. Pay very close attention to it. It's probably one of the few times that Trump, in one sentence only, sums up a very, very detailed geopolitical discussion. This was published on Truth Social. It was determined by all, this means both delegations, that's already very, very big, that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. We have to, okay, take a minute, all of you, to examine what's been said here. It's immensely important because in one sentence, Trump completely destroys the reasoning of NATO, the EU, and the backers of the Nazi fascists in Kiev, with a few words, in fact. So this is what he really wants. And this is what, at the same time, Putin managed to impress on Trump's brain. We need an overall solution. Ukraine is part of it. So we solve, theoretically, the proxy war that obviously Putin would not say that outright, that you, Empire of Chaos, started against us using Ukraine as a proxy. But the most important thing is the reset of our strategic relations. Very, very important. Now compare this Trump quote with Medvedev. And as we know, Medvedev is not a very moderate, calculist, meticulous strategist as Putin. Medvedev is on the blunt side with some trolling aspects, makes him immensely entertaining, but at the same time, he's a former president of Russia. He's for all practical purposes, the number two in Russia. So whatever Medvedev says, if he's trolling or when he gets very serious, which is the case here, we have to pay attention. So quoting Medvedev, the president of Russia personally and in detail presented to the US president our conditions for ending the conflict in Ukraine. This is immensely important because we can see by Trump's reaction that he's finally starting to get the picture. And he had to listen from Putin himself. So we can imagine there was some serious background involved in the discussions. And we could even venture to say that Sergei Lavrov had his 10 minutes because Lavrov is probably the number one person on the planet apart from Putin who knows the dossier back and forth. Coming back to 1991 is not only coming back to Maidan or the start of the SMO. Lavrov knows everything about everything when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. So obviously, and it is quite interesting that Putin made a reference to Lavrov sitting in the first row during the non-presser presser, pointing to him. I love that because this means Putin pays a lot of attention and deeply respects Lavrov personally, not only professionally, but personally. So this is the first part of the Medvedev quote. Second part, most importantly, in Medvedev's words, both sides directly place responsibility for achieving future results in negotiations on ending hostilities on Kyiv and Europe. Can you believe that Medvedev is saying the same thing that Trump said in his Truth Social post? That's absolutely, that's immensely impressive. And I would say that these two quotes are the resume of what really happened during these 150 minutes. And of course, none of us was expecting it would go this way. And to this degree of, I wouldn't say understanding, but at least from the American side, a deeper understanding of the underlying causes of the whole drama, which is what Putin, Medvedev, Lavrov, everybody has been insisting for 3.5 years, at least. And then something very, very important, Danny, and all of you, our audience, concerning, in fact, BRICS. Don't forget, Putin was there also as a top BRICS representative in the middle of a hybrid war, tariff war, in some cases hot war against Iran, cold war against the BRICS as a whole. So Trump was over there representing Xi, Modi, Lula, etc. Very, very important. Who did Putin speak to before he went to Alaska?
All the BRICS, yes.
Not only all the BRICS, Danny, but especially Xi Jinping.
Yep.
Especially Xi Jinping. And of course, he spoke to Lula, he spoke to Modi, absolutely important. And Xi and Putin, we can say, after Alaska, the guys who are really writing the script for this big geostrategic game, they are Xi, and it's Putin and Xi. They are Xi and Putin together. So this is what the BRICS and the Global South are going to get from this meeting. And very, very important, at least for the moment, Trump apparently promised not to slap sanctions on BRICS members, at least for what? For the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depends on how it goes from now on, or probably before their second meeting, which, as we all know, the whole planet knows, including lizards in islands in Java, that Putin officially invited Trump to go to Moscow for the next meeting in English. And obviously, I was switching between channels, of course, taking a look. And these imbeciles in CNN, BBC, etc., they still don't understand the fact that Putin understands English perfectly. And he speaks relatively well. He never speaks English in public because it's a matter of national pride and a diplomatic matter as well. He speaks Russian, his own language. But he understands perfectly well English, and he doesn't even need a translator. He has translators only for the finer points. He doesn't even need translators. For instance, there's a dialogue that was caught by Russian cameras backstage. I published a little photo about this on my X. They had a Russian translator, which is probably the #1 Russian translator who was translating for Putin in Alaska. But Trump and Putin are talking directly, and Putin is answering directly to Trump without even resorting to his translator. And this happened from the beginning at the tarmac at the airport. So this facilitated things enormously, in fact. So were we expecting this degree of politeness and understanding coming from the American side, especially, and none of us did. So this was an enormous surprise. Now, of course, the whole devil in the details start now. Is it possible to sell from Trump's part anything to the neocons, to a great deal of US ruling elites, to the Atlanticist elites, from the East Coast all the way to the big capitals in Europe, and especially all the way to those big families in the UK, the city of London, etc. Not to mention the whole Brussels complex, NATO, EU, and then all the way to all those Nazi fascists behind Zelensky in Kiev? No, we know it's impossible. And he has already started with this phone call with Trump himself said, look, it was tough. When he says that, this means obviously they are beyond horrified. If their mainstream media, which is beyond pitiful, and I did some scrolling this morning on UK, Italy, Germany, and France, mainstream media, basically, and they are beyond cataleptic, you know. Can you imagine the people who really run the show in the Atlanticist sphere? Very, very important. Considering what was leaked so far. From the American side, not much. From the Russian side, there's some stuff that I'm basically keeping to for my column, and I would like to have some extra confirmation during this weekend. But one of the things that I was told by my interlocutors in Moscow, and this is very, very important, Danny and all of you, because in the long breakdown that they sent me, this was point number one. Okay, I will quote without quoting. So this came from a very good source, very close to some of the members who were there. Not necessarily on the table. Yes, on the table, yes, because this means Lavrov. And of course, we have very good relations with the Minister of Foreign Relations, but also with Belousov and Silvanov. When they were both approached by Russian media after the summit, both Silvanov and Belousov, finance and defense, they both said it was excellent. And these guys, they don't have this sort of adjectives in their mouths all the time. So I'm gonna quote the first point of what I received. It was firmly put, and this was firmly put by the Russian delegation, by Putin, Lavrov, and of course Ushakov. Stop all direct U.S. weapon deliveries to Ukraine as a vital step towards the solution. Of course, there's no question that the Russians had to tell Putin and the Americans directly this thing. And very important, Americans accepted the fact that it's necessary to dramatically decrease lethal shipments. You see, this is nuance. It's not that they're going to stop, but they will dramatically decrease. And obviously, who's going to pick up the slack? NATO. And okay, Europe is key in this solution. So they are being very circumspect. No? They regularly supply and arm Zelensky, so let them keep doing it. This is what one of our interlocutors said. Let them keep supporting Ukraine financially and keep arming them. But there's an enormous problem. And there is a discussion about numbers. And the Russian side came to the conclusion, even before going to Alaska, that the NATO-EU compound, they don't have the money to keep supporting Kiev, and they don't have the weapons. Even if they start buying tons of American weapons paid in euros that, by the way, they don't have. First, they need to get the euros paying exorbitant interest rates to buy these American weapons. And then they can think of restart weaponizing Kiev. So this supply chain is not going to work on both sides, on the military side and on the financial side. The Russians know it, and obviously Trump and his team, they also know it. So this brings us back to what might be Trump's strategy. He's already talking to NATO, not to EU, European Commission. You cannot imagine Trump picking up the phone to call Brussels and talk to the toxic Medusa. Forget it. He's going to talk to NATO only, because NATO is what matters. And they said, look, we are trying to find a solution, etc. Okay, what is your position? And we know what's the position. NATO's position is the American position. And then we have all the chihuahuas barking right and left. Okay, so you want to continue the war, and we're trying to find a an overarching solution for everything. Okay, the war is yours. So find the money to buy our weapons and pay us in euros from now on. That's it. Very, very simple. So Trump's argument is very straightforward. And we can say that after Alaska, this was refined to one sentence. His phone call to NATO and his conversation with Zelensky Monday in Washington, that's it. It's one sentence. Okay, the war continues if the Europeans pay for your war. And we're going to be out of it. It has nothing to do with us anymore. We are interested in having an overall reset, restart of U.S.-Russia strategic relations. So, Danny, this is, let's say, the major headline and, the first 3-4 paragraphs. If this was an article, you see. There's much more, of course, but this is the breakdown of what really mattered. And once again, none of us were expecting this.
And I want to play a brief clip of Trump on Hannity,
Yes.
what he said about this one big point they can't agree on. In my assessment, I don't know how much this was about coming to some kind of Trump-Putin deal for peace more than it was allowing the United States to punt this to Europe, to Kiev. If they disagree, the war continues. Russia's not panicking about that because they're winning. And so, as you said, they're willing to let the United States punt it, and the United States will still be involved. Obviously, as you said, Europe can't do this. Ukraine can't do this without the U.S. They won't do it well anyway. But this allows Russia to then work on these other points that you said are so critical. This major issue, he said, they can't agree on, because I think this might be kind of this way of keeping the maybe the the neocons as happy as they can be in this dire moment for them. Here we go.
Make a lot of progress.
The meeting took place in this room.
Yeah.
This is where you met, right in this room.
Well, let me examine it. Oh, there it is.
That's where you were sitting.
That's it. I would say that's it. Yep.
So did you have alone time with him?
Yeah, I did. I did actually after our speeches. He made a very good speech, and I also finished it up. And afterwards, we spoke. Right after that, we spoke very sincerely. I think he wants to see it done.
Yeah. In your press conference, you talked about a lot of things that you agreed on, and maybe one big issue you don't agree on. Are you prepared to go public with that?
No, I'd rather not. I guess somebody's going to go public with it. They'll figure it out. But no, I don't want to do that. I want to see if we can get it done. It's not a done deal at all. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine has to agree. I mean, President Zelensky has to agree.
So I wanted to stop it there, Pepe, because he literally says somebody's going to leak it. There's this one big point. And then he talks about Ukraine. So it's obviously about Ukraine.
It's obviously about Ukraine.
Agree on. To my other point, though, for me, that's like where Russia comes in to all of this and says, yeah, we can more than tolerate this posture from the United States and from Trump, because no matter what happens, we're working to get more of what we want.
Of course, what they agreed upon is secret. And obviously, this was imbued from the start in that crucial sentence by Ushakov immediately after the Witkoff visit to Moscow, when Ushakov said, the Americans have presented a proposal that we consider acceptable. So this was already in the original Trump proposal. And this was what made Putin study it carefully, propose Alaska for a face-to-face meeting, was basically to discuss this acceptable proposal. That's the chain of the most important part in this chain of events. This means that for Putin and the Security Council to consider American proposal, this means that apparently, we don't know the details, of course, Trump and at least some around him understand finally the underlying causes of the whole Ukrainian tragedy. Can we bet on it? No, we can't. But considering that Lavrov was in the room, once again, Lavrov had time to explain to Trump And in 150 minutes, if Lavrov had 10, Lavrov can explain the whole thing in 10 minutes to anybody. So this is very, very important. And of course, business. Why Trump wants an overall deal and a reset of strategic relations between US and Russia, essentially. Business deals. And what about oil and gas, once again? Where? In the Arctic and Eastern Siberia. So very, very important. Okay, let me see the dates. I think it was on the same day. Where is it? Yes, on the same day of the meeting in Alaska. Putin signed a decree, very, very important. And with this decree, it will become possible for ExxonMobil to come back to Russia and start investing again in the Sakhalin-1, a gigantic gas project in the Sakhalin Islands. In October 2022, this is a very important story because in October 2022, the management of the Sakhalin-1 project was transferred to Rosneft completely through a Rosneft subsidiary. And at the time, ExxonMobil, they had 30% of these shares. They withdrew completely. Don't forget, this was a few months after the start of the SMO. Lots of sanctions, zillions of sanctions on Russia. So ExxonMobil had to leave. And basically what Putin was telling Exxon is, you have to leave. There's no way you can start, you can continue to work here because of the sanctions, and it's impossible even to move funds. So Exxon, they had 30% of the shares of this gigantic gas project. The other ones who were part of the project, they stayed. An Indian company and a Japanese company. But Exxon, they exited, and you know how much Exxon lost by exiting the Russian market, and specifically this project, $4.6 billion. This in the oil gas universe in the US and on Trump's universe is a lot of money. So we have to make it possible for ExxonMobil to come back to Russia. So this means what? Trump 2.0, they're already studying which sanctions they have to lift so ExxonMobil can come back to Sakhalin-1. So this, I quote all that just as an example to all of you of the real interests behind the possibility of a reset. Of course, we're not getting to the most complicated part, which is nuclear missiles, a possible renewal of the INF treaty, etc. In terms of Trump, what registers is business deals. And oil and gas for big American companies in Russia, in collaboration, for instance, with Rosneft, that's, holy grail. And this will be one of my first questions to anybody that I meet, especially meeting Rosneft executives. Have to ask them right away. So it's true that ExxonMobil sooner or later is going to go back and you're going to work together again in the Sakhalin Islands. Let's see. So, and this ball is rolling very, very fast.